James Melendez, thank you so much for joining me today. James, all about business. Today I'm going to talk about total information and process availability that I call TIPA, T-I-P-A, developing knowledge, process, and awareness culture. Stay tuned. I'll give you thoughts, perspectives on this very important topic that is related to a subset of knowledge management. Stay tuned. Now, I did say in the beginning this is about knowledge management, but it's also about centers of excellence and organizations, and it doesn't matter organizational type. This could be for-profit, nonprofit, governmental, and other organizational types. And I believe you'll see in this presentation that I think there is a huge amount of progress that needs to be made in order for the workplace, the modern workplace, to improve. Today we see this jumbled, wired mess, and this is really talking about that we have chaos every single day, every single minute of every single hour in almost every organizational type. And again, this doesn't matter on the type of organization. It's not just a for-profit world. It's just not the nonprofit world. It is all organizations that come together and want to solve problems, want to create value, want to sell a product or a service. And in many ways, this jumbled, wired mess is exactly what exists in many organizations today, unfortunately. It does have a consequence in terms of pricing, in terms of maybe a particular cost of doing business, or even providing services if you're a nonprofit. Our knowledge, organizational knowledge, is important, such as knowledge, process, and awareness culture needs to be developed in order for this to be not just an afterthought. Centers of excellence don't have to struggle into creating propositions to help people understand, but also have those individuals come to play to making decisions on their own, but also being mindful of those that they are around that can actually benefit from better organized knowledge. It's the how, when, where, who. It's also about creating transparency, knowledge sharing, harmonization of topical matters, robust processes. Removing ambiguity is really a huge thing that I think organizations need to learn how to do better. Solutions. I think solutions is really important. I put this twice in the DNA strand because it's something that I think organizations don't think about. A solution process, a solutions proposition for people to work better together. Right here you're going to see process orientation, but also ease of use. Most organizations for employees, doesn't matter if they're brand new to the industry or maybe they are veterans of the industry that they are participating in, really struggle. And that's unfortunate because it's not that everyone needs to struggle in an organization to do good work. It's that organizations need to do better in terms of organizing what they're doing so employees that come to work, show up to work, open up their computer, and start working. Really, the organization wants to do better and should do better because it's actually going to cost of delivery of services. Perhaps it's improved, perhaps it's innovation that helps an organization to be markedly different from its competition. So organizational DNA is hugely important, and it's often assumed that it happens already. But I can tell you in the next slide, that is not what's happening in many organizations today. There's a case for decreasing difficult work environments. And if you look online today, you're going to find a lot of things that really don't point towards difficulty in the work environment. But I would say that there's engagement scores, especially those in many organizations, especially in the United States because it's well documented, have a low engagement score. This is really something that organizations need to improve, and there is a cost to it. Now, low employee engagement is a costly expense, $450 to $500 billion per year. That could be used for other things, such as improving efficiency in delivery of products and services. And when I look at employees often struggle for 3.5 months to learn the details of their job. That's a long time. That's 25% of 1 year period of time. So it's extremely difficult to do. And it's not just onboarding, but it's also keeping those employees engaged over the long run. Having employees, and you'll see here, 81% of employees report feeling frustrated when they can't get the information they need to do their job. 81% of employees report getting frustrated when they can't get the information they need to do their job. That's a really bothersome feature. Now, the average employee spends 5.3 hours per week waiting for assistance or insights or knowledge from coworkers. That's a huge number, but I would actually push back and say that's probably even double that or even triple that, which is a significant part of a 40-hour work week. Now, this is from the Gallup poll, and you're going to see that U.S. employee insights over a 20-year period is relatively low. Not much is changing. Now, 36% of employees are engaged, and that's actually a super small number. It actually has increased, say, 10% over a period of 20 years, but that's a very long time. And I would ask, is it really the employees that are changing or the questions that are being asked? That number may be very different if there is not consistency in how the survey is being implemented, because I have been involved in implementing surveys at organizations. Questions as relevant as possible to expand scope of questions that are being asked in engagement. So it's picking up on what's needed in an organization. Now, I do believe there's guiding principles in helping organizations to improve ease of use for employees to work in. The guiding principles are knowledge over systems, process over personality. Now, knowledge over system, this is important. I'm not going to go through each of these bullet points, but I think it's important to think about. Just because you have a system doesn't mean that it's really going to solve problems for an organization. In fact, it may automate chaos, or perhaps it's really a very expensive endeavor to go through, and it's really hard to onboard people. It's expensive to keep people trained on a yearly basis. So systems themselves don't automatically improve execution. It's people and processes that do that. And if it's actually not designed well or not optimized, that process will help to automate chaos in a system, which null and voids the reason for having a system to begin with. So manual processes always fail. Always, always, always fail. Also, implementing the wrong system for the wrong task. That happens quite often in organizations. So it's really to keep a healthy aspect and review of the systems you do adopt, making sure it's solving the right problem. And it's really helping to address in an optimized fashion. So using business process excellence to making sure you're taking care of the best business practices in your organization today. Process over personality. Process is ultimately a buy-in for an organization, and yet sometimes individual leaders really think about themselves in terms of they think they are the process, or perhaps their thoughts or viewpoints are more important than a process, and perhaps can be scratched over in terms of really working and executing towards that solution. So process can be codified, and it's something that's knowable and shareable. Personality is ever-changing and hardly reliable, and so it's not a consistent thing you can look through. Most organizations are difficult to work in. It doesn't matter the organizational type, nonprofit, for-profit, governmental, and so forth. But it is lack of the organization's understanding itself in terms of what is the organization, how does it function, what are its processes, what is something that is really lacking in an organization. I would say optimize processes, or even processes at all. So, I think organizations rely on their past, their legacy, and tend to think that things still operate just as efficiently as they did 10 years ago or previous iterations of that organization and leadership styles and managements that have happened before. So there's a knowledge divide in organizations, those that know and those that do not. Leaders fail to recognize the knowledge divide and how unproductive their organizations are. Now, this is something that really shouldn't be that much of a mystery. So organizations look towards doing an engagement survey every single year. And most engagement surveys and scores tend to show that processes are lacking and something where organizations can do a much better job. And also, there's no knowledge management or centers of excellence. These are organizations that are hard-coded into an organization for improvement. And without that, I think organizations will always falter and never improve what they should be improving. And improvement is not just something that is a methodology, a fancy methodology that doesn't yield results, but I believe there are many methodologies in a center of excellence to identify and to bring out and to tease out those particular needs of an organization so that it improves what it is doing. And then I do believe there are some very specifics in TIPA, total information and process availability. I think there is things to look at, such as process optimization and excellence, process hygiene. Now, these two together, in my opinion, are really important to look at. Now, when I look at this, it's about making sure that process hygiene, we don't use that term, we use data hygiene quite often, but process hygiene is actually forgotten about. We don't talk about it, we don't think about it, but it's one where processes go astray, or perhaps there are no processes where there should be some. And even if there's a process in place, it does need to be looked at occasionally, perhaps on a yearly basis, half-yearly basis, and does need to be scrubbed for, data cleanliness or process cleanliness, probably better said. I've been in organizations where somebody would point out, what about this, James, or where does this exist, or how can I find out what this actually means? And, you go in a rabbit hole, if you will, and you can't really find out or understand where things are because it's not easily found. You have to go through several people to understand. And even when you ask several people who might be knowledgeable, you still don't get the answer that you need. Total layout of org's information. Now, this is not necessarily about confidential information. It's not about that at all. I think most people in an organization really are not interested in that. They just want to make sure they can function, do their job, process what they need to get through as quickly as possible, and not really linger or stop or think or question. I do believe systems tied to processes and system discipline is important. We have many systems. You can look at a tech stack for any organization. Again, it is any organizational type, governmental, nonprofit, for-profit, but there's a lack of discipline. There's also a lack of ability to tie systems to processes, and I think there's a great need for that today. So systems tied to processes, this is really important to think about, and I think this is one where system tied to processes and system discipline. A lot of organizations believe just by having a system in place is good enough, but if you have a particular system, I know several that I work with intimately, and I know that there's perhaps too many duplicates, or really what is the source of truth? What is the source of knowledge in order for me to execute that particular record? And oftentimes there is a lot of chaos in that. So organizations really need to tie together their systems and how they're implemented, utilized on a daily basis. Managing ambiguity and data hygiene. So these are in the lower right corner, and I think they're related. Managing ambiguity is one where I think organizations don't think it's important to think about or to implement against. I think ambiguity is a huge problem because in an individual contributor's world, really there's a rush to complete work. There's a rush to get results. And you may be involved in managing ambiguity. That is, you're trying to find a solution where there may not appear to be one. There's data hygiene. There's a lot of problems in data today, and organizations struggle through all the vast amounts of data that they have in their systems. But what is correct, what is accurate, and what is something that can actually be trusted and utilized for prescriptive uses in the future. Being more specific on TIPA, you can look at things like user guides, SME, subject matter experts, videos, communication, codification of knowledge or knowledge bases, ease of use. I think this is something that's important to look at. Baseline information, frequently asked questions. You can think about other things in your organization to help people be aware, to unroll things, to be uncloaking things, to make a crispness in an organization's capability to move forward. Knowledge baselining, I think this is important. So sometimes in an organization, roles and responsibilities are those things that are just assumed versus actually being published, or perhaps people talking about, my role begins here and ends there, so that people are aware of how they make things move forward. I think all baseline information on systems and applications is needed. Someone coming new into an organization may know of a system they've used in the past, but the current iteration or current instance could be utilized slightly differently based on customization. So baselining on processes, what does that look like? Where is it stored? How is it taught? Baselining information on activities and critical dates. These are essential as well. These often are codified or hard to find, or it's held in a tribal knowledge center, if you will. That tribal knowledge center is, maybe based with a few people in an organization. You can hear this often by saying, be sure to ask James or ask John or ask Joanna about where things exist. And this is something that is really going back to personality versus process. So all based on general information on org entity, cross-functional partners, operations, and continuity should be widely distributed and known in an organization. And lastly, quality. There's a sense that, just having quality knowledge is important versus just knowledge. So knowledge baselining is important. So when I think the ultimate complement for an organization, and you can see here above the water, below the water, which is knowledge, process, and awareness culture. A complement to an organization is when something becomes a culture. It becomes second nature. When people are working through their organization, they're creating knowledge, they're creating processes, they're really sharing their awareness to the environment and doing so in a way that is even, I would say, subconscious because it's so integrated in everything they do. But it's also something that people don't really have to think about as opposed to, maybe being promoted or, asked to do things versus I want to share the information I have. I want to share the knowledge that I've accumulated over time. So I think over time you can look on the lower portion, the blue and green sections below the water, and see that maybe there is low engagement, poor customer relationships, poorly designed processes, and really taking that uptake, if you will, in this pipeline of really understanding the organizational problems, creating a plan for knowledge and process and ease of use of information and systems. So meeting plan, milestones, and process gates. And then lastly, achieving, again, that knowledge, awareness, and process culture is second nature. It should be something all organizations strive to have and to be. And on the last slide here is knowledge and information awareness cultural development. It is over a period of time when organizations understand their need to change, understand their need to bridge the gap of lack of awareness, lack of information, lack of knowledge. So it's really getting back to quality of life issues. How many employees work, more than 40 hours? Probably most organizations have their employees work obviously more than a standard 40-hour work week. And in doing so is not to be heroic. In some organizations, that could be 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 hours a week. And that's really not a quality of life. I think organizations in this particular step, say step 2 here, is really going to be the best place to work. That is something that is really by intention. You don't get there by hoping to be the best place to work in, but actually arriving on a plan to get there. Increasing to number 3, high engagement. What does that look like? What does that feel like? What are the particular points to reach in an organization so that organization is something that increases a very high engagement level? Going to step number 4 is thinking about efficiency, creating efficiency in an organization, creating a really nice platform for people to operate in so they are actually accomplishing the work they need to do, and doing so in a way that's not completely stressful and in a way that adds value to the enterprise, nonprofit, or governmental entity. It's a competitive advantage, especially in the nonprofit and the for-profit world. You can actually do something that another organization most likely won't do. So most organizations are not going to acknowledge their knowledge deficits or information and awareness deficits. They're just believing that they're just moving forward and doing all they need to do in order to get that organization to compete against another. But I believe there's more organic ways, important ways for an organization to make that achievement. And if you do all these things, you'll have knowledge, information, and awareness culture. This is, again, not by accident, but by plan. So you have to have an organization that's willing to make these changes and to move an organization forward. I do appreciate your time on this Team Excellence module. I do believe it's important for an organization to look at their total information and process availability. This will be something that is really unique and different from organization to organization. Perhaps some of your organizations do some of this already, but I suspect many do not. I believe that there's only one way to do it, and that's to be consciously aware, be willing to make the change, to have buy-in not just from individual contributors, but also senior leadership to make those fundamental differences, to make your organization a better place to work, to create a culture that is knowledgeable, process-oriented, and full of awareness, and really that becomes a culture. Thank you so much for watching today. I do appreciate it. List your questions and comments below. Stay tuned for more business and organizational topical matter to come. Thank you again for your support. Share this video with somebody who's interested in this knowledge management topic. I will see you very soon. Thank you.